We're going to move on to the next movie. The next movie is, it's actually a documentary. It is called Hidden Battles. And this is a documentary that follows several different ex-soldiers and their struggles with post-war and their lives trying to proceed after being in heavy battle. There are several. There's a Vietnam vet. There's someone who's involved in the Sandinista Revolution. There were some Middle Eastern soldiers. And I love the concept of this documentary, and I really got to enjoy a lot of the people that they talk about, especially George, who is the Vietnam vet, whose letters to his mother actually was included in the New York Memorial. And so those were etched in the stone. And I like the fact that, of course, all of them, first when you're coming back and it's hard to incorporate yourself back into life. But there were some people that it's continuing, and they're still running from helicopters, which is just a terrible thing when you think about that.
Yeah.
The one of them who was the other American soldier who was having a hard time, and he still kept his regular schedule, where he just traveled across the country, not in a weird van, but he still kept his schedule of going out and doing shooting range and stuff, and he still was struggling with
at the end of the film,
they
mentioned that, yeah.
And I loved the Esmeralda, who was with the Sandinista. She was the revolutionary, and she was, of course, the woman, and she had her 2 sons, and she talked about how her city was under siege, and she still kept her sons there, but she felt she had to be a part of this, and she went out there, and it's the 28th anniversary now of that revolution, and so she went back and moved back there, and it was very interesting. And even though she hadn't been there, going back there, she was still very shell-shocked in this place. Even though now it doesn't look like it was a war-torn area, some of the same people were still there in her community, but it was still, there were moments. It's a very heartfelt documentary, very short and brief. Unfortunately, I wanted some more of that, but in a good way.
Yeah, and I think it was a little meandering at point. It seemed like it could have used a little tighter editing and then more focus. Like there were some things that I wish they would have asked or gone into more. But what I will say is that I thought like you said, the concept was really fascinating. And the idea of asking people, ordinary people really, who have killed, and ask them, what is it like to take another person's life? I mean, it's sort of a very philosophical question on one aspect. You could read books about it, but here we're just talking to the real people. And I like that they picked such a diversity of people. You have, man, woman, different races all over the world.
Different wars, different places. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, different wars. So it's not just like the new Iraq War documentary or the new whatever. It's not tied to one particular issue. It's about human conflict and what it does to people. And the post-traumatic stress disorder guy, I thought was particularly, Aaron, was really interesting how they get into what that actually seems like, because you hear about PTSD, but you don't actually know what it actually looks like.
And he was over in the subway, and it was got to be too overwhelming, and that was just so hard
it would just like overtake him.
Literally
suddenly.
got physically ill. Yeah. The one that I really liked was Sarah. It was the who is now a dancer.
Oh, from Israel. Yeah.
And he was, he went into the. Of course, you're required to go into the military there when you're 18, and then he ended up training more of the soldiers. And he'd been away from it such a long time, became a dancer, and was trying to incorporate his past into his new company that he was putting together. And then he went back and kind of got permission to go there. And then they gave him a gun, and he went through the little drills. And it really freaked him out. He was just like, "This is something I hated. This is something that's very distant from me. It's not me anymore. But there's still this connection to it. He picked it up, and boy, he was able to do it.
Right, he could just shoot just like that.
He could just do it, and he said, and that was so scary for him to have that connection to something that he hated and despised, and it was something that was not a part of his life anymore. That's scary.
Yeah, and I like that they talk to his girlfriend. They often talk to the family members or the closest, those partner of the person that they're interviewing to find out how it's sort of affecting them, which I thought was also an interesting take. And this filmmaker, it's a female filmmaker, Victoria Mills, which is one of the great things about going to independent film festivals. By the way, as you see, filmmakers, first-time filmmakers, women film directors, minorities. You see
all
people,
these oddities.
Well, you just get to see a more diversity of opinions and viewpoints and perspectives, and her whole deal apparently is making sort of these movies that go to certain causes, and they're not necessarily partisan or political. Like in this case, a lot of the proceeds from this movie go to veterans organizations, and a lot of it is, and she's having screenings across the country, often sponsored by veterans associations for veterans. And it's not like saying, Iraq good or bad, or, it's not making big value judgments. It's more trying to get into the personal perspective perspective of these people and what it felt like. And not all of them have all negative things to say about their experience when they were in the military or whatever conflict they were in. Yeah, so which is very interesting. Yeah, and so, and as you know, particularly the woman in the Nicaragua, you know, she had things to say about how she, you know, at the time was very proud of what she did and getting involved and trying to fight for her people. And but she obviously still had some.
The one thing I didn't like about the movie, and this is a minor complaint here, was that Aaron, one of the American soldiers they followed, and he had a beard and long hair. And then at one point, and then towards the end of the movie, he cut his hair and shaved his beard. I didn't recognize him at first. I'm like, oh, we're following somebody else? His voice sounds familiar.
Well, I recognized him because he looked like the photos back when he was a military guy when they showed again, when he was all close shaven.
Yeah, when he talks about, because he was a sharpshooter, and he talks about taking aim and pulling the trigger, that's a pretty powerful scene.
Yeah. Well, so, and just to have lots of variety on this week's show, our next movie is Sissyboy, which is a documentary about the
which was
fabulous.
Gonna be the name of the show.
Yeah, and we were talking about Bryan there, not me, but
well.
It's a documentary about the infamous Portland drag queen troupe, political drag queen, I'll be careful to say that, called Sissyboy, that operated out of Portland for many years and have since disbanded. Now, what's interesting thing about this particular movie is that it is going to be on October 20th showing here in Salem, but they're doing a whole event around it called the Drag Queen Thing Wing Ding. And Southside Speakeasy, one of the local businesses in town, is help sponsoring it, and they're going to have, drag queens there, and members of the Sissyboy troupe, and so you'll get to see them live in action, such as it was. And so that's on October 20th. But this film, you know, I didn't know about the Sissyboy troupe, and I like to think of myself as up on what's going on in Portland to a certain extent, but I hadn't really heard much about them, so I found it interesting from that perspective, and I liked that. Now, I know you're not a big fan of drag queens.
Well, they're not technically drag queens.
Yeah, and in this movie, I thought it was interesting because it was more of like a comedy of the grotesque or something. You know, they're purposefully pointing out that they're drag queens, so they're not trying to pretend to be women.
They don't shave, they don't tuck. It's not the typical drag queen, super scary clown.
Right, and then a lot of it's political satire, very politically incorrect satire. Pointed about current issues. So there's, they have a skit they do about an abortion. They have a skit that they do about Matthew Shepard, which was
Scarecrow, which is when they talk about why they did that,
songs and,
and then they explain, oh boy, this is not for the faint of heart, and if you're
easily offended, Sissyboy may not be the film for you. But if you have a really, if you like, or if you have a raunchy sort of just get all out there sense of humor, I think you'd enjoy it. I actually enjoyed this one quite a bit. So I thought a lot of the jokes and the skits were very funny, and it made me wish that I had seen them before they broke up. So it actually is sort of exciting that they're coming to Salem. And whether it will be a full-on show, I don't know. But
I just wish they would have had more of the show. Well, obviously we're going to get some of that because you're seeing the shows starting with the origins, and of course there's the end, and that seems kind of a typical. But what they were doing, I thought, was very interesting. There was a similar troupe in San Francisco. But what they were doing, unless they talk about the documentary, so I know so much about it. But and I did enjoy.
Not that you attended
comedy
regularly.
No. But I do enjoy the politics, or I did enjoy they were trying to make the commentary that they were doing, especially with the Scarecrow. That is very, very touchy subject when you're talking
even among
about
the gay
Matthew
community,
Shepard.
that's a no holds, no touch.
It's a martyr. You don't do that. But what the point of what they were making, I thought was very smart, and so I liked that. And once they showed that, then the movie really took off for me, because I was like, oh, okay, so I know what you're doing. This isn't just, the follies.
I would have liked to see more of the skits, too, especially the ones that were very pointed, that made them so controversial.
Yes.
They showed some here and there, and then they showed them go on their West Coast tour. And that was interesting that they go to San Francisco, which is sort of like the build-up to the film, but then when they finally performed there, it didn't seem like the San Francisco audience liked them very much, or there was sort of like it seemed like a mixed reaction maybe from the crowd. It was hard to tell.
Yeah.
And they edited it such that I felt like I didn't get a good sense of what actually happened at the San Francisco performance. And so that made me sort of question, okay, well, did it go off badly and they're trying to cover that up, or did they just lose time and they just sort of edited it quickly because they needed to get that through with that? And they go into a lot of the personalities of the different performers and what their lives were like before they joined the troupe. You didn't like that part?
Well, that's always hard because you're not going to just sit there and have the one that's all lollipops and sunshine, because that's not good drama. You always got to get the ones that are not
Right.
But then again, there's always that stigma of going, well, then see, this is why these guys are this way, and this is why they're doing these things. Yeah, so that's always the struggle there within. It is if as long as you have a thick skin, this is definitely a one to check out. This is definitely a show, and I'm sure there's fans of their original troupe, and so this will be a big big homecoming.
You liked it. If you're open-minded and you just want to get out there and have a good time, Sissyboy is the movie for you.